world with artificial intelligence and blockchain, as well as 4 other books, and is lectured at numerous academic institutions, including Purdue and Stanford here in the United States. Patrick has spoken about business trends, technology, and digital marketing at hundreds of conferences around the world, as well as TEDx events. It's my pleasure to introduce Patrick to our global Renaissance Executive Forums community. Today, he's going to share his latest talk on the 8 trends that are accelerating as a result of the pandemic and quarantine. Please all join me and let's give Patrick a warm Renaissance Executive Forums welcome. Patrick, it's great to have you here, my friend.
Yeah, thank you so much. A virtual welcome. Thank you to all of you who have joined the call today. I hope you're all navigating this insane situation as smoothly as possible. I'm happy to be with you today. Thanks in particular to Julio and Kim and also Rick for the opportunity. So let me go ahead and share my screen. I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Just give me 1 second. Okay, here we go. So, and you can control the video feed on the right-hand side of your screen. You can have multiple faces showing, or you can reduce it to just yourself, and I think you can delete it entirely. So you can also move it around if it interferes with the slides in any place. So you can change that as you wish. Okay, so as I mentioned, my name obviously is Patrick. We're talking today about surviving this pandemic and the quarantine and the economic fallout. In particular, we're going to be going over 8 trends that are accelerating as a result of this pandemic and quarantine. They form a convenient acronym, which is SALVAGED. I'll go into that in a second. We're going to talk maybe for about the first 20 minutes, roughly, on those 8 trends. Then after that, I want to move over to disruptive innovation, because let's face it, what we're going through is highly disruptive. I mean, it's disrupting everything that we can imagine and more. And I'm actually going to, before I have some models that I'm going to share with you, and they're really fascinating, 2 in particular, that will allow you to both anticipate and profit from disruptive innovation. So it's really, really good, good stuff. But before we go into that, I'm going to talk briefly about an example that's playing out right in front of our eyes, just getting started, because I want you to see the domino effect that's going to take place and how one disruption can lead to a second, and it can lead to a third and a fourth and a fifth. These are dominoes. One thing naturally leads to the next. So that example will be instructive. And then again, as I say, after that example, we'll go into those models that I mentioned just a second ago. So let's jump right into the content and just get this started. Salvaged stands for these 8 trends: self-sufficiency, analytics, liquidity, virtualization, automation, government, exponential thinking, and decentralization. And you should know that I'm right now just finishing up the manuscript for a new book. I'm hoping to have this book, and this is a mock-up of the cover. I don't know if it's going to look exactly like this, but this is kind of an early mock-up. If you would like a copy, please, it's unedited. I'm literally finishing the manuscript. I'm hoping to have it done by Friday or Saturday. It has not yet gone to the editor. And so there will be changes. But if any of you want a copy of the manuscript in PDF format, I'd like to provide that for you for free of charge. So, and I'll give you my email address at the end of the session. So just keep that in mind as we go through the content. Okay. The underlying message in the book and also this topic is, this talk today is change is opportunity. Look, this is a difficult time. Everyone's talking about it. There's a lot of human suffering. There's a lot of people suffering financially, medically, and that's going to play out over the course of months. But at the end of the day, we need business leadership more than we've ever needed it before. And change is opportunity. When things are changing, there are opportunities. And that's what this talk is about. How do we find those opportunities? How do we take advantage of the situation? So, number 1, self-sufficiency. We're going to see some interesting things play out over the next, as I say, this could last 6 months, a year, 18 months, 2 years, easily. Off-grid living. There's a trend towards off-grid living, even survival kits. There's companies that install bunkers, like bomb bunkers in people's homes. Those companies are busy today because people are thinking that way, or a larger percentage of the population is thinking that way. The gig economy is going to explode. We've got 26 million people in the United States who have filed initial unemployment claims, an order of magnitude to almost 20 times higher than anything that we've ever seen in history. So those people need money. And unfortunately, the people who are unemployed and have lost their jobs are people who, for the most part, don't have a lot of savings. So their backs are against the wall. They need money. So we're going to see an explosion of gig opportunity, gig economy jobs, and people in those jobs. Chicken hatcheries, can you believe it? Chicken hatcheries are booming. Why? Because people don't want to have to go to the store to buy their eggs. They want to have chickens in the backyard that produce eggs. Again, I'm trying to paint a picture of what this is going to look like, right? Think about your business. How does this relate to your business? We're going to see an accelerated adoption of solar panels. Why? Because people want to have access to their own energy, living off the grid. And we're going to see an increase in libertarian political views. Even conspiracy theories, all of that sort of stuff. We're seeing a rise in that already, and that's projected to continue. So within your business, as a business owner, as a business executive, whatever role you play, an investor, can you help people live off grid and become more self-sufficient? Right? This whole presentation is about how can you take advantage of these trends. So again, I know there's hardship out there. I'm not going to go into that. I'm trying to focus on where's the opportunity. We need business leadership to get people back to work. And that's what this presentation is about. Number two is analytics. Boy, have we seen that analytics is playing an enormous role in the pandemic so far, tracking where it's taking place, where are the incidents, where are the deaths, and all the different metrics that go along with that. And of course, these trends, just so you know, they're not new, right? This has been happening for a long time. A lot of these trends were already in place before this pandemic got started, but they're accelerating as a result of the pandemic. So data is the most valuable asset you have. Sit down and take an inventory of what are your sources of data. What data can you access? Right? The Internet of Things and the sensors on machines is a huge part of data accumulation today, but there's many other sources of data. So take an inventory, take stock of what data you can get your hands on. Data visualization tools are getting more and more sophisticated, particularly from the software as a service providers. So ERP platforms, think Oracle or SAP or Epicor, or the CRM platforms like Salesforce. These are all enterprise software packages, and they're incorporating unbelievable data visualization tools to try and help you make data-driven decisions. The lowest hanging fruit for many businesses, particularly ones in the SME space, smaller businesses, medium-sized businesses, the lowest hanging fruit is just to get better trained on the software you already have, the software you've already paid for. And quite often the providers of that software will provide training free of charge. So think about the machines you have, the equipment you have, and the software you have. Can you get better trained on those assets to leverage them better into the future? The use of all this data, optimization, manufacturing, logistics come to mind. Healthcare is being transformed right now by data, and also the user experience. Understanding the customer journey. What specifically is the situation of your customer, and how do you tailor your marketing to that specific customer in that specific situation? It's absolutely clear that the more tailored your marketing message is to your customer and their situation, the higher the probability they're going to convert into a sale. So user experience is a huge and valuable place to look at your data. So how can you leverage data more effectively in your business? Again, these are review for many of you, but this stuff is also important, and more important today than it has been in a long time. Number three, liquidity. Cash is survival. For the next 6 months, and again, this depends. Not all businesses are in the same situation. Your business may be one of the lucky ones where you're not seeing a huge cash crunch. But many, many businesses are really struggling in the liquidity department. The number one question you need to be asking yourself as a manager or an executive within your business or the owner, does this, whatever you're doing, whatever project you're embarking on, does this enhance or detract from liquidity? That should be your number one concern for the next 6 months, for the next year. Liquidity is priority number one. We're going to see higher cash balances on corporate balance sheets over the coming months and years. We've already seen, I mean, literally unprecedented central bank intervention, not just here in the States, but the ECB in Europe, the Bank of Japan, the National Bank of Switzerland, all around the world. And I have to say that there is the potential for a USD-based sovereign debt crisis. Right now, trade is lower, international trade is lower, oil demand is lower, and the price of oil is lower. And all that combined reduces cash inflows of US dollars in emerging markets. And those same emerging markets have to make payments on their sovereign debt, which quite often is denominated in US dollars. So what's happening is these emerging economies around the world, and the ones that are most affected, at least so far, include countries like Brazil, Mexico, Colombia, Turkey. These countries are, I mean, they're heavily affected, and there's a shortage of US dollars in their locale, and they need those dollars to make payments on their debts. So what's the result? They have to sell their currency in the international forex and buy US dollars. So that raises US dollar, and it devalues their currency, right? And we've already seen this over the last month already. The US dollar is surging relative to other currencies around the world. So it's making the problem even worse. And it's a structural problem. There's no easy way to fix this. You can't easily print the money and distribute it. So there are some very serious risks on the horizon of the contagion, the financial contagion of this situation and how it plays out. That's all in the liquidity space. So as a business owner or as an executive, how can you maximize your cash position or help your customers maximize their cash position? Very important. Number 4, virtualization. And this is probably the most obvious of the trends. Working from home, everyone's working from home, including myself, sitting here at my desk in my second bedroom in my where I live. I'm sure you see the virtual background I have here in front of me. It looks like a nice office. Unfortunately, that's not my actual office. Everyone's working from home. And what we're finding and learning is what self-employed people have known for years. You can be really productive working from home. And we can expect more and more people, even when we reopen our economies, when the vaccine is delivered, when the pandemic is officially over, we're still going to see much higher rates of people working from home. But it's going to go far beyond that. Events, education, activities are increasingly going to go virtual. We're seeing online adaptive learning platforms. Today, we're seeing that primarily with the kids. And boy, they're all using it today because the schools are closed. But we see this adaptive learning where if a child doesn't understand the content, the system can recognize that on the fly and direct that child to a subroutine that makes them learn that content better before they can continue on the primary path, right? And so we see all these subroutines. So it's no longer a question of what score did you get on the test. The question is just what level did you get to, right? Because you can learn at your own pace. The platform has this adaptive capability to understand how much you've captured, how much of the comprehension level that you've gotten so far, and provide these additional resources in areas where you're weak. So what does that mean? It means there's less testing required, and it means that you can progress at your own pace. So skipping grades, for example. But we're going to see this whole thing migrate into corporate training programs. We see this more and more. The university college system is effectively broken. It's very expensive. It's a 4-year time lag. They're teaching content that by the time you graduate is no longer even relevant. So corporations, including Microsoft and Google and Facebook and many others, are developing their own internal training programs and using these adaptive learning technologies. And we're going to see an acceleration of that. And it's just going to be a matter of time before stories emerge of high school graduates who skip college altogether and still become very successful in corporate America or wherever they might live. And once that happens, we're going to see a switch. Maybe within 5 or 10 years, we could see a switch away from colleges and universities and towards more corporate training programs, and those will be virtual as well. Virtual reality providers, mixed reality providers are guaranteed to benefit from this long term. A little bit longer development cycle, but just recently Microsoft got a $480 million order for augmented glasses for the military, the US military. That's a great leading indicator. That means probably tens of thousands of young soldiers in the United States are going to get trained on those augmented reality headsets, and that is inevitably going to migrate into the rest of society. So, and that's going to make virtual environments, including this one. This is Zoom, but there are others. And Zoom is surprisingly good, but it's still not as good quite often as an in-person event. Well, believe me, when virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality start playing a larger role, we're going to see that, that delta between the two narrow or even reverse. So, as a business professional, can your products or services help people thrive in virtual environments, right? What can you sell to people to help them thrive in virtual environments? Number 5, robotics. Let me just make sure I've got notes here just to make sure I remember everything. So I want to make sure I'm in the right place. Automation, again, this started 100 years ago or more, but we're seeing an acceleration of this trend. We've all heard of robotic process automation. That's going to continue. We're going to see an accelerated adoption of drone technology. Anything to minimize human proximity. How do we bring people back to work but still keep them safe? It means we have to have distance between them, right? What can we do to bring them back and minimize human proximity? Drone technology will have a role to play. And we're going to see automating repetitive tasks. You can go to any grocery store or Costco and see the retail self-checkout kiosks. McDonald's now and airports and other places have kiosks where you can order rather than dealing with a person. 3.4 million retail cashiers in the United States, by the way, so it's a huge number. But we're going to see all those sorts of tasks be automated in the years to come. So the question again, as an executive, can you automate your business or help your customers do so themselves? Number 6, government. Look, some people love government and some people hate it. And I'm okay with that, right? It doesn't matter to me which way you lean. The bottom line is this is a huge power grab by government. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I think we need a strong government response to this pandemic. But, I mean, we've given up a lot of personal freedoms just in the last month and a half as a result of this pandemic. So there's power going to government organizations, global organizations, globalists, right? I'm referring to global organizations like the World Health Organization, the United Nations, the International Monetary Fund. These are, and again, some people love the idea of global organizations and some people hate the idea of global organizations. Either way, we need to know that there's, number one, they have huge budgets and they're spending money, right? They desperately need to get the economy back on track. So they're spending money. But we've seen things like vaccine registries be proposed here in the United States. I'm sure in other places as well. We've seen proposals for digital currencies. So we're talking about cryptocurrency equivalent to the US dollar. Both of those could have a lot of benefits, but they would also give a lot of power to the government that they don't have today. And again, we've seen enormous monetary and fiscal stimulus. So as a business owner, can you sell products or services to support government programs? Even if you hate government, just think about the opportunity. They have huge budgets and they're spending money, right? Is there anything you can sell to government departments? And it's not just federal governments. You've got state, provincial governments, municipal governments, school districts, police departments, fire departments. They're out there and they're spending money. So if you have a product or service you can sell into those circles, it represents a new revenue opportunity or perhaps a growing revenue opportunity for you. Number 7 is exponential thinking. Wow. Probably for the first time in history, the public truly understands exponential growth. Why? Because we're living through it. We're living through it day by day. We see these numbers go up. I remember when we had 150,000 cases in the United States, and then it was 300, and then it was 600, and then it was over 1 million. And we see these numbers just go up so quickly. It's incredible. So the public has a renewed, and in some cases, a first-time awareness of exponential curves and exponential growth. That's relevant in climate change. It's relevant in technology. Technology evolves along an exponential curve, and it's relevant in our investments too, in the form of compound interest, compound returns. This will affect business strategy as well, particularly as technology plays a larger and larger role in business strategy. So can you embrace exponential thinking in your business strategy and even in your marketing, right? If people increasingly understand exponential growth, can you tap into that somehow in the way you communicate within your marketplace? And last but not least, decentralization. This is probably the one trend that encompasses almost all of the others. It was also a central tenet to my last book. My last book was called Anarchy, Inc., Profiting in a Decentralized World with Artificial Intelligence and Blockchain. Things are becoming more decentralized over time. We used to have maybe a dozen primary media outlets. Now we literally have millions to choose from. We used to have, exclusively central power generation. Today we have solar panels on millions of roofs around the world. That's a decentralized power generation mechanism. Even the central banks themselves, those are central, but we see the emergence of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. Those are decentralized versions of our monetary system. So social, economic, political decentralization, blockchain, which is the technology behind Bitcoin, is based fundamentally and by design on a decentralized architecture. Open source software is a decentralized development process. But we're also seeing trends in decentralized management. So right now, where are the rest of your management team? Where are they all located? Are they all in the same city? Do they need to be? They don't. This goes hand in hand with virtualization and working virtually at home on platforms like Zoom. You can hire people from anywhere around the world. So you no longer have the proximity limitations that you've had up until recently. And this pandemic is making that very clear. So open up your thinking to where you find human talent. You can adjust your human talent acquisition strategy. We're seeing decentralization increasingly in the cloud as well, with the trend really in the last 5-6 years towards hybrid cloud architecture, edge computing, bringing the processing power closer and closer to the customer. That's a trend that we're seeing is going to continue, right? We for a while, Amazon Web Services, they run 30% of the cloud, and Microsoft Azure is hot on their tails. And they used to have exclusively large data centers distributed around in different parts where mostly low energy or low cost of energy environments. Today, we're seeing more and more smaller data centers being created closer to the customer, trying to reduce latency and bringing the processing power closer and closer to the customer. You could imagine if this trend continues, that maybe one day we would all have access to ubiquitous processing power through any electrical outlet, for example, or any Wi-Fi connection. Though that's where the trend would go at the extreme, is that processing power would become completely ubiquitous. And then the only remaining differentiator in the marketplace, the technology space, would be software. So you can project these things forward, but decentralization is a trend that kind of underlies almost all of the other trends. So as an executive, as a business owner, can you capitalize on decentralization in your management structure, in your operations, or in your marketing? Right, these are all really, really important questions to ask during this time. And again, it boils down to one thing, which is change equals opportunity. Today, everything is changing. Everything's changing. Imagine 100 blocks, and most of the time, 95 of them are nailed to the ground. They're not moving. There's only 5 that are in motion. Today, it's the opposite of that. There's only 5 blocks that are nailed down. 95 are moving. Everything's moving. Everything's in motion. There's huge opportunities in that for people who are leaders, who can envision a better tomorrow and are willing to step out and redefine tomorrow's economy. So obviously what we're talking about here in one form or another, it's all innovation. And so this is going to dovetail here into the second part of the presentation. I want to talk about an example which really, I hope for all of you, demonstrates the scale of this and how significant the changes can be. In the coming 5, 6, 7 years, these things can happen very, very quickly. And I'm talking about the coming revolution in the automobile industry, transportation. And in particular, I want to start with the first area, which is autonomous driving. This is happening a lot faster than people realize. So just follow with me. We'll talk about this in a structured way so you can anticipate when these things are likely to play out. Where are the highest number of obstacles, unforeseen situations when you're dealing with driving? Well, that would be in city streets. Imagine Manhattan, downtown Manhattan in the middle of rush hour, maybe during a snowstorm, right? That's going to be the highest number of unforeseen situations, obstacles, things that you have to get around, right? So who's leading in this space? Well, you've got Google Waymo, and they've been driving cars autonomously for a number of years already. And over the years, they have accumulated about 20 million miles worth of data, autonomous driving data. What's the number one thing you need for artificial intelligence or machine learning? It's data. It's data. Data is the new oil. Data is everything. The more data you have, the faster your systems can learn and improve. Right? It's absolutely critical to get the data. So Waymo's got about 20 million miles worth of data. Well, then you've got Tesla. They've accumulated over 2 billion miles worth of data through their autopilot feature, right? That's a stunning difference between those two. So Tesla has a huge advantage right now from a data perspective, right? You've also got Uber, and they're collecting data. Now it's different data. They're not all collecting the same things. So Uber has different data, but they're collecting data all the same. And in China, you've got the Uber equivalent, which is called Didi. They're also making a big play towards autonomous driving. So one of the things we have to ask ourselves is, how do these systems learn? And this is maybe the best example that I've ever come across to understand how machine learning works and the network effect. So when Tesla introduced their autopilot feature in 2015, there were literally tens of thousands of automobiles already on the road, Teslas already on the road with the hardware necessary to use the autopilot feature. So when they announced it, it was live and people started using it. And there was a story, very fascinating story of a guy who lived in the Santa Cruz Hills, which is just outside of Silicon Valley in the San Francisco Bay Area. And on the way to his house, there was apparently a very tight corner, like a hairpin corner. This isn't the corner. I just bought this image, but it gives you an idea, you know, a tight corner at some point leading up to his house. And that first day, as the story goes, he was driving home with autopilot and decided to take his hands off the wheel and just see what happened. And so he got through the corner. He didn't crash. There wasn't a crash or anything, but the car veered outside of the lane. Of course, the brake came on very quickly, the warning, you know, to retake control of the car. So it was basically a fail. It wasn't an accident, but it was basically a fail. But the next day he did it again and again and again and again. And 2 weeks later, his car knew how to take that corner. But it wasn't just his car that knew how to take that corner. It was every Tesla knew how to take that corner. Okay, this is critical. I want, seriously, think about what's happening here. When the network effect, they call this fleet learning, okay? The network effect means that you can take the experience of every individual player, every individual participant in your network, and upload those experiences to the cloud. That's where the true intelligence resides, in the cloud. The cloud is an enabling technology, okay? So you upload all this data to the cloud and you fix the problems up here. And when you fix the problems, you deploy them network-wide, okay? So if you're interacting with the VC community or private equity, they're all talking about network effect and fleet learning, because that's the power. That's the exponential effect, right? The more people you have on the network, the faster you can improve, right? It's absolutely critical. This is happening very, very quickly, right? So now, what has less obstacles, fewer obstacles than city streets? Well, you've got the freeways. The freeways have fewer obstacles than city streets. So what's happening in that space? Well, we've got the company Otto, which was purchased by Uber. They did a pilot program, proof of concept, what they call a POC, proof of concept. They drove this truck 125 miles down the freeway to Colorado Springs. There was a guy in the cab, but he wasn't driving. Payload was 50,000 cans of Budweiser. Anyway, it got there on time. The point is that this technology is there. So what we're talking about is long-haul hub-to-hub trucking. Long-haul hub-to-hub trucking, freeway only, right? And keep in mind, 47% of long-haul trucking fees are the salary of the driver. So that means the first company to deploy autonomous trucks has a 2-to-1 price advantage over their competitors, 2-to-1. And what does that mean? That means that all the other competitors are going to be in a mad scramble, race against time to get autonomous trucks themselves as soon as the first person, the first company deploys. Are you in trucking? Do you use trucking? How can you use this? Right? This is going to be a huge transition. So this is the Mercedes autonomous truck concept. Tesla has come out with their semi. And if you don't need a driver, you don't need a cab. So here is the Volvo version of their autonomous truck. So you see there's significant differences. Okay, so it's likely that long-haul trucking will be approved legislatively. The regulatory authorities will approve long-haul trucking before they approve city driving. Right? Intuitively, that makes sense, right? Now, what has fewer obstacles than the freeways? Well, you've got agricultural land, right? And here, autonomous trucking, autonomous driving is already being used today. Look at this thing. This is just the coolest thing. So the big combines in Iowa that are harvesting corn, and Kansas and so on, a number of them, the big companies, those tractors are satellite driven. You can map your farming land to the square inch, optimize the route perfectly. There's people on those combines, but in many cases, they're not driving, right? So this thing's just the neatest thing ever. And there's a lot of concepts that are already out, and this is also happening in the mining space. So you see autonomous mining trucks. Here's one that was featured just recently. This is available today. So what we're talking about, we're really just waiting for regulatory approval before this starts to deploy. Now, that's only half the story, right? This is my point. So we've got a disruption. The disruption is autonomous driving is coming, okay? I would guess long-haul autonomous trucking is going to be approved probably sometime this year. City driving, I would guess within the next 2 years, we'll start seeing approval. So there's already some things in limited neighborhoods or campuses or garages. Germany has some car structural garages where you can do what's called level 4 autonomous driving. But level 5, where you're just on your own, probably a couple of years away. But this is only one half of the story. The other half of the story is the transition from gas vehicles to electric vehicles. Okay, this is happening at the same time, right? Different influences, but it's the same time frame. So a gas vehicle, what they call an ICE vehicle, an internal combustion engine, ICE, ICE vehicle. ICE vehicles have on average about 2,000 moving parts. An electric car has less than 100. This is this is a critically important thing. Less than 100, a 95% reduction in parts. That means that the entire maintenance process of vehicles is going to collapse. The parts for maintaining vehicles is going to be reduced by 95%. It's a huge change. Now, right now, battery electric vehicles are still a little bit higher in cost than gas vehicles. What's the most expensive part on an electric vehicle? Well, it's the battery. So let's take a look at battery technology, because that's coming down in price as well. And these are all very predictable cost curves. They're coming down, and now there's literally billions of dollars being invested in battery technology every single year, which is accelerating the decline in costs. Right now, battery technology is reducing in price by between 14 and 18% per year. And so we can very accurately get an idea of when an electric vehicle will literally be cheaper. No subsidies, just cheaper, pound for pound, than an ICE vehicle, than a gas vehicle. And on this chart, it's mapped by that light blue horizontal line, and we're talking about right there, roughly 2023. 3 years from now, an electric vehicle will literally be cheaper than a gas vehicle. And that doesn't even consider the fact that electricity is 90% cheaper than gas on a per mile basis. This is another, I mean, these are all so important. Electricity, to fill up your car with electricity, to recharge your car, your electric car, is 90% cheaper, costs about 1/10 as what it costs to fill up your car with gas. So that means that the overall cost of ownership is going to be lower than a gas vehicle 2021. That's next year. That's next year. So this is coming, it's right on top of us. And so of course, Tesla has staked their claim exclusively on electric cars. Volkswagen has made a significant play in electric vehicles, and there's countless others that are developing their own electric vehicles. So we have these two disruptions. So what happens? We've got these converging technologies. You've got autonomous driving, you've got electric vehicles. This happens everywhere in technology. Again, think about your industry. When technologies converge, that's when all kinds of new possibilities pop up. So what's this likely to lead to? Well, we're talking about transport as a service. Transport as a service. No need to buy a car. You just hail a car, an autonomous car comes and picks you up. They're estimating, again, 90% cheaper than gas. So they're estimating a per mile rate, roughly 1/10 of what the current rate is. So Uber and Lyft today have an average per mile cost, at least here in the United States. It's different in different countries for sure. But here in the United States, the average cost is about $2 per mile. And their estimates are that it could be 15 to 20 cents per mile once we're talking about electric vehicles. Tesla, for example, is estimated 18 cents. So, and there's another critical, here's one more really, really important data piece to consider, and that is that privately owned vehicles are parked 90 to 95% of the time. You probably own a vehicle, maybe two. They're parked, they're not moving, right? They're not being used. It's the lowest utilization rate of any large purchase, large consumer purchase. Cars are the lowest. They're used 6% of the time on average. Meanwhile, a transport as a service car can be driving 90% of the time if necessary, and only stop it to recharge the battery and do maintenance. And the maintenance is much cheaper as well. So it's a huge difference. So we can expect, we're talking about companies that are going to introduce fleets of vehicle. Individual people will have no legitimate reason to buy a car unless they're an enthusiast of some kind or they want it for nostalgic purposes. But from a cost perspective, by 2025, it's going to be cheaper to just use autonomous electric robo-taxis. And we can expect the people who develop those fleets to use Wall Street money to buy 100,000 cars at a time or more. Huge orders, right? Amazon just recently purchased 60,000 electric trucks. So that's the way these large companies operate. So we don't have to wait for the consumer, the public to purchase vehicles, and after 11 years they replace the fleet on average every 11 years. We don't have to wait for any of that. We're talking about fleets that are going to come in and use Wall Street money and just buy the entire fleet in one go. We could see car sales drop by 70% because you don't need as many cars to get the same level of transport. And now here's the interesting one. So that's the third innovation, right? We've got autonomous driving was the first, electric vehicles was the second, transport as a service was the third. What's the fourth? If the cost per mile is 18 cents, just as an example, 18 cents per mile. And if you have a minibus where you can put 6 or 7 or 8 people inside of that bus, then you're getting a captive audience for a cost that's lower than traditional advertising routes if you're doing traditional advertising. What does that mean? It means you could literally be offering free transportation. You could imagine a Starbucks, for example, having these buses going around. You can hail one and they get a captive audience. There's a good chance you're going to buy a coffee on that minibus. So this hasn't started. There's actually another guy called Tony Seba who I follow. He's a great futurist as well. His idea originally, and it's absolutely true. If the cost is that low, we could imagine commercial buses offering transportation for free in exchange for having you in their bus for the duration of that trip. So you could imagine meditation buses, yoga buses, virtual reality buses, video game buses, Starbucks buses, right? All sorts of different buses. These are the sorts of things that can happen. Again, the domino effect. One thing can lead to the next, right? That's why it's hard to anticipate where you end up, because you don't see step 2 until you're finished step 1, right? That's why it's so important as a business owner to take a step forward. Anything in the direction of your goals, try something, anything. The cheapest way you can try something, try it. Because when you take that step, you're going to see what's in front of you at that point. You couldn't have seen that at the beginning. You only see step 2 when you're finished step 1. So anyway, these are all examples, of course, of disruptive innovation. And this is kind of where we're going to close. I'm going to give you those models. Remember, I talked about those 2 models. And this stuff is absolutely fascinating, but it's important to know disruptive innovation invalidates existing business models. Right? Disruptive innovation can pull the rug out from an entire industry. Right? So those are things you have to keep in mind. And that means you have to stay on offense. Right? This is not a time for defense. As a business executive, business owner, don't take a defensive posture and try and protect your revenue streams as your number 1 priority. That should be your second priority. Your number 1 priority should be to expand, to expand, to get new revenue opportunities, right? Don't ask who's going to eat our lunch. Ask instead, who else's lunch can we eat? Okay. Who else's lunch can you eat? Right? Be on offense and see always what you can capture, what revenue you can steal. A few obvious examples, right? Apple disrupted the music business, right? They'd also disrupted the phone business. And then of course, Google disrupted the phone business as well. Disruptive innovation comes from what I refer to as adjacent markets, right? They're adjacent markets. They're not it's not exactly, if you have 3 industries that are related, but they're not the same and they just overlap in certain spaces, the disruptive innovation quite often comes from those overlaps, right? It comes from the edges, it comes from the sides. That's why so many business executives get caught off guard, because disruptive innovation, incremental innovation, there's 2 types of innovation. Incremental comes from the center of expertise, right? CEOs and executives are always very aware of incremental innovation. But disruptive innovation comes from the sides, right? And so you get caught off guard. They can sneak up on you, okay? So easiest way to see what's an adjacent market is to think to yourself, who are your biggest suppliers? Who else do they sell to? Those are adjacent markets, okay? Think about who are your biggest customers? Who else do they buy from? Okay, those are adjacent markets. Or you can make a list of 20 or 30 adjacent markets in a half an hour by going through this exercise and just asking yourself, what are they doing poorly? And some of them are doing great. They're awesome industries. They're functioning well. Everything's going fine. Okay. But some of them, and I do these executive strategy sessions, and I love doing them because we go through these exercises, and immediately within, half an hour, literally, we already see 2 or 3 or 4 obvious opportunities where people are not doing things very well. The industry or the company, they're not functioning properly. They're missing out on opportunities. That's an opportunity. Can you bring that in-house? Can you bring that in-house? Can you do it better than they do it? That's the question. That's the question. Stay on offense. Can you do it better than they do it? Right? LinkedIn disrupted the recruiting business, right? Amazon disrupted the book business with their Kindle e-reader. Uber is disrupting the food delivery business, right? And Amazon's doing the same with groceries. Google, Apple, Tesla, disrupting the car business. Nobody would have dreamt of that 20 years ago. And here we are, even 15 years ago. Facebook wants to disrupt the ISP business with these solar-powered planes. They fly at 70,000 feet, and they can fly up there for months at a time, delivering internet connectivity to the people below. And of course, Google's trying to do the same thing with their Project Loon. And last year, on May 23rd, 2019, SpaceX launched their first Falcon 9 rocket, their first one that was full of these Starlink satellites, which were deployed in lower Earth orbit. Unbelievable. There were 60 of them in that rocket, and they will eventually be part of a constellation of 12,000 satellites going around the Earth, providing global internet coverage. Talk about disruptive innovation. Talk about disruptive innovation. And SpaceX has the lowest launch cost, so they can do it cheaper than anybody else. This is the kind of stuff they're going to pull the rug out from an entire industry, right? Always ask yourself, what can you do, right? What disruptive innovation, where can you find new revenue? And again, it's another reminder. It quite often comes, disruptive innovation comes from the edges. It comes from the crazy fringes of your industry that people don't often want to discuss. A perfect example of this is nutritional supplements. Where's the cutting edge of nutritional supplements? What's the bleeding edge of nutritional supplements? Guys, it's in horse racing. Not exclusively, but many times it's in horse racing, and it makes sense. It's a less regulated market. It's a less regulated industry. You got $1 million invested in a horse, he's not quite good enough to win. You'll try anything to see if it works. Some of you probably take creatine. I take creatine, right? That came from horse racing, right? D3, the impact of D3. Right? So it's zinc loading, the impact of zinc loading on testosterone, that started in horse racing, right? And then they see the efficacy in a less regulated environment, and then it migrates to the mainstream, right? What's the bleeding edge of online marketing? It's in the fringe. It's in the online gambling. It's in pornography. That's where they test the latest wireframes and lead magnets and conversion funnels. That all happens in the highly competitive space of online gambling and porn. And then when it's proven its efficacy, then it comes in, right? That's the way these things work, right? Disruptive innovation comes from the fringe. So that's one model, right? Thinking about your adjacent markets. That's model number one. Let's do one more. Disruptive innovation, again, it's never 100%. These are models. There's always going to be exceptions. But disruptive innovation tends to cater to the least profitable market segment first. Right? What's your least profitable market? Those are the customers you hate. They're a pain in the neck. They don't have any money. They call too much, right? They complain too much, right? There's every industry's got their customers that are a pain in the neck. And what do they want, by the way? They want a simpler, less expensive solution. That's it. Two things, simpler, less expensive. But that's not where we focus, right? For obvious reasons, we always focus on the most profitable market segment because that's where the gross profit is. That's where the margins are. That's where you make your money. So everyone's selling these premium products and you need those margins. We'll talk about that in a second. But what every industry does the same thing. And so you end up with this pervasive upward pressure where everyone's always trying to sell the higher end products. And who gets left behind? It's the people at the bottom. It's the people at the bottom, right? And so I always introduce this to when I do these sessions and also in my keynotes, I always tell people to look up, look down, look side to side. And this is a great little tool that you can use to think strategically in your business and how to expand and how to take advantage of the opportunities. So number one, look up. That's those premium products. That's the gross margin, the gross profit. You need that money because that's how you're going to fund innovation, right? Innovation can be boiled down to one concept, which can be summarized in two words: budgeting failure. Innovation equals budgeting failure, right? If you're innovating, it means you're trying something that hasn't been done before, right? You're trying something new. Jeff Bezos, the CEO of Amazon, that guy is brilliant. He said, if you know it's going to work, it's not an experiment. If you know it's going to work, it's not an experiment. The point is you got to try something new. And if you're trying something new, the bottom line is you don't know if it's going to work or if it's not. If you want to be innovative, you have to have a budget for innovation. Money you're willing to lose to try new things. So looking up is a really important piece, because you keep selling those premium products, keep selling to those premium customers. You need those gross profit dollars. At the same time, maybe once a month, once every 2 months, look down, right? That's where disruptive innovation comes from. That least profitable market segment. What do they want? Who's catering to their needs, right? Maybe you want to compete with them, maybe you don't, but you have to be aware of what those people, what they're looking for, and who is trying to sell to them. That awareness alone will help you navigate the world of disruptive innovation, not just now, but years into the future. So look up, look down. And finally, look side to side. Those are those adjacent markets. Those are those new revenue opportunities, right? You have to look to the side. So look up, look down, look side to side. Who else's lunch can you eat, right? That's the question. Look for those new revenue opportunities. So I'm finished here. I'm just last 3 slides here in front of me. Change equals, so if you have questions, right now is a great time. Get them into the chat, and we're gonna, answer those questions with Rick's help here in just a few minutes. But look, everything's changing. It's scary and it's difficult and there's suffering and there's pain and we all know it. But there's opportunity, there's huge, and we need business leadership. I mean, more than ever, change is opportunity. So what I encourage you to do is just to think bigger about what's possible, about the role you can play to redefine the economy of the future. This is an interesting time. It's exciting. It's scary, but it's exciting. So again, the book it's not edited. There's still mistakes. There's still problems. If you want my email address is on the bottom of your screen right now. If you would like a copy, just send me an email. I'm not going to add you to a list. There's nothing like that. I'm just going to send you the PDF. And here's what I'll tell you. It's going to the professional editors on a Monday, most likely, and they'll have it for a week or 2 weeks. So if you want it, and if you get it, and if you actually read it, like in a week and a half from now, you don't have to, there's no pressure. But if you do, and if you have like a testimonial comment, send it to me and I will include it in the first part of the book. I'm in a race against time to get this thing out. So normally what I would do is I would send this out to a whole bunch of people and ask for their comments. And then I would put, a lot of times when you open a book in the first page, it says, praise for the book or comments from other people. So it's that right there. And I'm using this event. I'm only doing it here just because I know this is a good group of business professionals. So if you want the book, send me an email. I'll send it to you in PDF format. I'll also send you the slides from this presentation. So you'll have 2 PDF files in that email. So you'll have all the slides. And if you have a comment for me, email it back when you're finished reading it, and I'll add that to the book. So, all right, I'm going to click stop sharing. And Rick, are you still, can you hear me?
I can, and we have a number of questions, so I'd like to ask you them.
Yeah, fire away.
The first one comes from Nelson Davalos. He said, "Thank you, Patrick. Great presentation and insights. What is your view on a potential break of existing monetary system? A couple of weeks ago, Ray Dalio of Bridgewater Associates hedge fund suggested that this might happen. If that's the case, blockchain might be the right asset class to hold."
Yeah, well, you just hit the nail on the head. That was an outstanding question. So we have been operating on a credit-based monetary systems for decades, since the post-World War II era. And in 2008, 2009, the financial crisis, there was real concerns that that monetary system could break. Now, we averted it. We got things working. There was a number of things that contributed to it, like the mark-to-market accounting rules, which were approved in March 2009. A lot of those things contributed, and we kind of averted the crisis. But here we go, 10 years later, with much higher debt levels and a much, much, much bigger economic hole to fill. Could the monetary system break? Absolutely, it could. How will it break is the more important part. Like that, you try to picture the sequence of events that could lead to that. So let's talk about Europe first, okay? Spain and Italy need enormous help, and they're, this is just exasperating all the problems from the financial crisis all over again. And this could result in Europe breaking apart because the northern countries are not going to want to take on all this debt for the benefit of the southern countries, and they're not going to trust that the money's going to get spent the correct way. So there will be an increased likelihood at some point that Italy or Spain or both will try to exit the union. And if they, the reason the EU negotiated so hard with during the Brexit negotiations is because they didn't want it to be easy for other countries to do the same thing. But now the crisis is so big that they might not be able to stem the tide. And let me tell you, bailing out Greece or Portugal is one thing. Bailing out Italy or Spain is quite another. So if that happens, the whole thing unravels. So that means the EU could effectively collapse. Let's say a year and a half from now, that sort of time frame, I'm guessing, and it might not happen, but if it does, it'll take a while to unravel. So that could lead to huge problems right there. So what about here in the United States? If the states, individual states, declare bankruptcy, if there's a path for a state to declare bankruptcy, that would have a similar effect to Italy or Spain wanting to leave the union, right? Again, if it's a small state declaring bankruptcy, that might be manageable. But if one of the larger ones, and they're the ones who are bearing the brunt of the virus right now, New York, California, that could be just an enormous, that could lead to a break in the monetary system as well. The third option is the one I mentioned briefly in the presentation, that we have potentially, everyone's worried that printing money is going to result in a lower dollar. I don't believe that at all. I think the dollar's going up, and it's not going to stop anytime soon, because there's a contagion upward momentum where once the dollar is getting high, the countries that have U.S. denominated sovereign debt are going to be desperate to get their hands on dollars to pay for those loans, and their desperation will result in an even higher dollar. So that could spiral out of control. So there's a number of, and there's probably others. So I've just mentioned three. I'm sure there's many others, but I absolutely believe that the credit-based monetary system could collapse at some point. And who would the winner be? Bingo, Bitcoin. I mean, if that happens, and I'm not saying it will, okay, I have no idea, right? It might not, I have no idea. But if that happens, Bitcoin goes through the roof, like an order of magnitude higher than we've ever seen. And that it could happen. But again, the blockchain is resisted by all the institutional players. Here's the deal. Who's most at risk of blockchain, threatened by blockchain? It's the banks and the insurance companies. Right. Meanwhile, who's investing the most in blockchain? It's the banks and the insurance companies. Same people, because they're terrified, right? They're terrified, and they're going to resist it as, they want to coexist with blockchain, but that is kind of an oxymoron. So they're going to resist it at all costs because they have stakes in the status quo. Well, if the monetary system starts to collapse and there's extreme stress in the financial markets, then you could see potentially a collapse, and in that case, Bitcoin would definitely win. And by the way, Bitcoin just broke it broke over a trend line just last night. It was right around 7,800, and it jumped up, and it went all the way up as high as 8,900 last time I checked US dollars. And it could easily be at 14,000 in 3 weeks. I don't know that. Again, I don't know, but it's on an upward trend. So is gold. So we'll see. We'll see what plays out.
I have a couple more questions that came from earlier in the talk as well. One of them that came from Pablo was, what do you think will be the role of telecommunications / internet in the future?
Well, I mean, it'll be everything. The virtualization, more and more things are going to happen over internet channels, and they're just going to, the bandwidth is just going to continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger. So let's talk about VR just quickly. First off, so far, we've been talking VR for a decade, and nothing's really happened. So we've been waiting and waiting and waiting for a VR headset of some sort to get broad market adoption. Hasn't happened, but it will happen sometime. And it's probably going to happen soon, judging from that $480 million order that Microsoft got to build headsets for the Department of Defense. So whenever it happens, sooner or later it'll happen. At that point, every large B2C company, business to consumer company, is going to be in a mad scramble to create virtual experiences which are going to be available on their website as part of their marketing funnel to engage prospects and their customers, their brand image. So Ferrari's going to do one where you can race exotic cars through a crazy course, or Coca-Cola is going to do something with polar bears in an Arctic environment, or, you know, who knows what it'll be, right? Disney will have the Lion King, you know, where you can actually go and talk to Simba or whatever. Like, they're going to create, there's going to be hundreds, thousands of these experiences. It's going to be part of our marketing environment, which means that people are going to be able, if they wanted to, and it's mostly kids probably in the early days, could spend literally all day, every day, wearing a headset, going to, you know, through one experience after the other. So, you know, we've heard stories of people who have played video games for 2-3 days on end and hardly slept and didn't eat. Sadly, we're gonna see more of those sorts of, we're gonna hear more of those stories. And the virtual world is gonna be more engaging and more exciting and more dynamic than the real world for a lot of people. A lot of people have somewhat mundane, unhappy lives. I mean, again, I don't know what the percentage is, but there's certain people who are in that situation. For them, the virtual world is a no-brainer. They're going to go there right away. And as those environments get more and more captivating and more immersive, it's only natural that the percentage of people who live their lives predominantly in the virtual world, that percentage is going to increase, right? All of that's going through telecommunications. All of that's going through internet connections, broadband. So absolutely, that's the core. Like Tesla, or rather SpaceX with their Starlink network, Elon Musk could be the wealthiest person and the most powerful person on the planet if that Starlink network gains the kind of traction that it could in theory, because he'll be in pole position for probably the most important sector going forward. So he's in a great situation. So yes.
Okay, we're a few minutes over when we were supposed to finish, but if I could ask for maybe just a few more minutes, I have another question that I'd like to ask of you, and I appreciate everyone staying a little bit longer than we had anticipated. This comes from Marissa. What is the main challenge that you can identify for the health industry, specifically pharmaceutical companies?
Okay, it's another great question. So the pharmaceutical companies are they're really in a tough position right now. So all of the most profitable RX medications are losing their patent protection. I mean, in the last 5 years, some huge names have lost patent protection. And for the next 5 years, just more and more and more. And meanwhile, we have competitors all around the world producing what they call biosimilar medications. So they're not exactly the same formulation, but they're very, very similar. And so the competition is huge and the revenue source is drying up. And meanwhile, so that's one side of the equation. We've got this downward pressure on research and investment dollars because you can't make money from these medications. They're just not coming up with as many RX, you know, all the low-hanging fruit's been picked already. But then on the other side, you have the whole CRISPR, Cas9, you know, innovations and gene editing and all sorts of unbelievable things that are happening on the other side of the equation. That's more biotech, but the pharma companies are definitely trying to get a piece of that action. So the source of revenue is going to change. The traditional model of having an RX medication and making billions on it and using that money to pay for investments, that model is going to change. It's not going to go away entirely, but it's going to morph into other sorts of revenue. And we kind of have yet to see where, you know, healthcare is going to change. Healthcare and education are probably the two industries that will change the most as a result of this pandemic and quarantine. Data is, I'm trying to think, let me say one more thing. Walmart has introduced their care clinics. Right, Amazon is looking at providing a new type of healthcare. So there's new players coming into healthcare space, and they're going to, and like Teladoc Health. Look up this company, Teladoc Health, T-E-L-A-D-O-C, Teladoc Health. They're doing amazing things, and their customers love them. So they're providing virtual. You don't have to go into a doctor's office. It's all done virtually, just like what we're doing right now. They're using data extensively and artificial intelligence and machine learning to come up with better insights So healthcare, the innovation is going to come from those sorts of private companies that, are maybe new to the industry, and they will migrate into the traditional players like Blue Cross Blue Shield or Kaiser or whoever. But they're actually, the biggest obstacle to innovation is legacy systems. And this is true in every industry. So if you have legacy systems to your old way of doing things, that's the biggest obstacle to changing, because you have literally millions and millions, probably billions of dollars invested in that legacy architecture. So the big providers like Blue Cross Blue Shield, like they're kind of stuck. They're behind right now. They're not innovating at the same speed as someone like Walmart or Amazon is, because they're coming in brand new and they're building stuff from scratch and they're doing an incredible job. So, where do we end up? I don't know. Truly, I don't know. But I promise it's going to be more virtual. It's going to be more like health oriented rather than right now where it's really sick oriented, where we don't really have healthcare. We have sick care. Like you only go to the doctor when you're sick. But that's going to change. This, with the, your Apple Watch tracks the number of steps, and pretty soon we're going to be measuring all sorts of vital metrics using wearable devices. So we're going to see innovation. Where it ends up exactly, I don't know if I have a great answer for you. But the pharma companies are struggling. I did an event in Turkey, in Istanbul, for Roche Pharmaceutical, and they're terrified. I mean, the biosimilars, they're being eaten alive. They're just losing their edge in one marketplace after another. So it's an uphill battle for them right now.
Patrick, may we ask you one more question?
Yeah, bring it on. Okay, absolutely.
Thank you. This comes from Rodrigo Aguilera, and he asks, how do you see the real estate industry post or after COVID-19?
Yeah, I mean, it's another good one. So a friend of mine has done, pretty well. He owns like 35 rental properties in different markets around the country, really 3 markets. But anyway, he thought he was really well hedged against a potential downturn. He thought he was in pretty good shape. Meanwhile, as soon as the quarantine started, the people who work at the property management firms that he hires literally weren't even coming into the office. So the rent checks that were being sent in weren't even being deposited. And then when they kind of got that figured out, it turned out that about a third of his renters didn't even pay rent, which, as it turns out, is consistent with another study by J.P. Morgan, I think, I forget. 31%. Listen to this. I mean, this is mind blowing. 31% of American renters were unable to pay their full rent on April 1st. This is after 2 weeks of quarantine. 2 weeks. 31% couldn't do it. May 1st is right around the corner, right? It's a couple days from now. I guarantee the percentage is going to be, I don't know what it'll be actually, 40%, 50%, who knows? But there's a lot of people in this country, United States and around the world, South America, same deal, that are really in a serious cash crunch. So what happens? When they can't pay their rent, then the people who own the properties all of a sudden are in a cash flow crunch themselves. They can't pay their mortgage payments. So now it's in the lender's box, right? And then you end up with, potentially foreclosures and liquidations. And now all of a sudden you got the same thing happening as we had in the financial crisis. But we have it on top of all the other stuff that we've had, like a decimated retail sector, decimated travel, decimated, corporate conference market and airlines. I mean, it's staggering the level of damage that's coming our way. So the real estate sector, I think, will end up with lower prices for sure. But it's going to take a little bit of time. Like right now, there's laws you can't even evict someone for 60 days, even if you wanted to. So there's a 2-month cushion right there, and then after that, there's going to be some months before people are actually gone. How many mortgage payments? How many rent checks do you miss before you can no longer make your mortgage payment? How long does the mortgage company let you be in default? Probably 3 months at a minimum before they try to foreclose. So I would think that that's all going to play out maybe 9 months from now, 10 months from now, maybe early 2021, I think is when we'll see those numbers. So I think the real estate market will probably, put it this way, next summer, prices will be lower than they are right now. That's my opinion. Prices are coming down. And then you have another whole issue, by the way, which is that if more people are working at home, the necessity to have office space diminishes because you don't need the office space as much. And so you've got, even that the tallest building in China, the Bank Tower in Shanghai, the thing is huge. It's half empty. No one's ever come to fill it. Even at night, you can see pictures look at online at pictures of Shanghai at night. You'll see the whole tower there, and the top of it has no lights on. So the thing's empty. And this is happening in Dubai and all sorts of different, look at Vegas. I mean, Vegas is going to take it on the chin. There's tons of commercial space that's all of a sudden is going to be empty. A lot of these small businesses are never, like the restaurants, they're not going to reopen, many of them. The same with a lot of small businesses. So there's going to be a surplus in commercial real estate. And so we'll see prices come down there too. So it's complicated and it is scary, but it's amazing to watch it. I'll tell you that. I can't believe that I'm alive to witness an event like this because I just never would have dreamt that I would see something like this. So,
as with each of these Insight events, we are recording this. And so for those of you that maybe aren't able to stay for the entire session, you'll be able to, we'll be making it available to you shortly, in addition to the information that Patrick said he'd send out to you with an email. But we did get another question, and I really would like to ask it. Do you have the time, Patrick?
Yeah, I absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so
I'm happy we have questions.
Oh, and they're great questions. So there was a question. My chat is moving. This is fantastic. But how can a small business benefit from artificial intelligence?
Oh, yeah, this is another good one. Okay, so the small businesses. Here's the way these things propagate. You got like the Fortune 100, and they spend millions and millions developing a new capability, right? Like think about the big data revolution, which started 2011-ish. They spent millions, and in the early days, they were losing money. And then the use cases start to emerge of where can it actually be used effectively, like predictive maintenance, for example. And then the capabilities get integrated into the enterprise software solutions, mainly ERP, CRM. So ERP is enterprise resource planning, CRM, customer relationship management. So again, the big names, Oracle, SAP, Epicor, those are all ERP providers, and Salesforce, I mean, there's lots, but so and they're all incorporating artificial intelligence right now. And many of them already have really impressive capabilities in their platforms. But here's what happens, and I've worked with a ton of ERP companies, like SAP in particular. I've done a bunch of stuff for them. And they all say the same thing. They say that 95% of their customers don't even come close to using the capabilities that they actually have available to them in the software that they've purchased. It's like Microsoft Excel. You ask someone, do you use Microsoft Excel? They're like, oh yeah, of course, I know it really well. That's not true. It's not true. They don't know Visual Basic. They don't know, pivot tables. They don't know VLOOKUP. They don't know half of it. They use a tiny little piece of the software, and the software is incredibly powerful. Well, the same is true with the enterprise software platforms that small businesses and the SMB players you're using software, and you've paid for software. And I'll tell you one story which was so it moved me. Anyway, a good friend of mine that I went to high school with in Vancouver, I grew up in Canada, and he's a buyer for a wire and cable distributor up in Canada in Vancouver. And his company spent millions of dollars and switched everything over to SAP. So now they're on SAP. And my buddy, his name's Andrew, he's a good friend of mine. He loved it. I mean, it was just his thing. His brain, that's just the way he thinks. He was really, really interested in SAP. And he was digging into it at night. He was digging into it in the weekend. I mean, he was exploring it. He couldn't believe there's so many things. He was digging all over the place. And so he started creating reports and sharing the reports with his boss. And maybe, I don't know, a month or two, possibly, I don't even know, went by. And one of his reports ended up on the CEO's desk of the company. And he got a phone call saying, hey, this is a great report. Can you add this, this, and this and rerun it? So he did that. And then he started interacting more with the CEO. And sure enough, he got a promotion, another promotion. He's doing entirely different things. He's using the software, and no one else in the company was taking advantage of it. So most likely you've got software that you have access to. So look at your team. Who on your team has the right aptitude? It might not be your thing. It's not my thing. Like to dig into that stuff, like it drives me crazy. I can't do it. But some people love that stuff and they can't get enough of it. Find that person in your organization and bring him or her aside and say, look, I need you to dig into these capabilities and see what we can, how can we use this software? That person's going to be thrilled. And you would not believe, this happened to Andrew, right? And he was providing actionable data to his superiors. And sure enough, the CEO was like, this is awesome. So learn your software. I know that's maybe simplistic. I hope it's not too far off from what you're hoping for, but you've paid for software, you have software available, dig into it as much as you can and just try to use the capabilities that you already have at your fingertips.
Another question came in. I guess if you're willing to stay with us a little bit longer, thank you.
Good.
How do you see the dental business this year?
The dental business?
The dental business this year.
Wow.
Yes.
I mean, decimated. I mean, it's just so brutal. They're closed. Here's the thing. So, for the first time, maybe in history, we've got 7.5 billion people on this planet all working on one problem. We have one common shared enemy. That's incredible. I mean, I don't think it's ever happened before. And there's a lot of smart people on this planet. So right now, for obvious reasons, the dental practices are shut down. I mean, as part of the quarantine, but even beyond that, I mean, they're right in people's faces, and they really have to be very careful, right now with the germs and so on. But I promise, there are amazing solutions coming. A lot of them are already here. There's 3D printers all around the world that are making, personal protective equipment for people to use. Just really innovative solutions that are coming. So the dental business right now, I mean, it's hard. It's incredibly hard for business owners right now. And my heart bleeds for when I think about it. I feel like I'm walking through 3 feet of mud. It just, it's kind of this overwhelming sense of just sorrow. But the bottom line is we're going to get through it, and there's going to be solutions, and people are not going to let their teeth go. So it's no problem. We just have to figure out how to do it in a safe way. And it's also possibly true, and I don't want to upset anybody or say anything controversial, but there are some indications now that the number of true incidents of coronavirus, of COVID-19, are 30 to 50 times higher than what we originally thought, because there's so many people who are asymptomatic. So what does that mean? That means that the mortality rate is 30 to 50 times less than what we've been led to believe so far. So it's possible that this thing can be manageable, and there's different parts of the country here in America where north of 20% of the people have already had it, and herd immunity is at 60%. Like we've already done a third of what it takes to get to herd immunity. So like, things could change faster than you think. The hard part is how long is it going to take for people to feel comfortable, getting on a plane, going to a corporate event, going to the dentist, or being in a room that's crowded with 300 people in it. Some people they can't wait. They want to do it, yesterday. But there's a lot of people, and let's say it's 20%. I'm guessing. I don't know what it is. Let's say it's 20%. So that means that restaurant revenue is going to be 20% lower. Airline revenue is 20% lower. Conferences lower. That's my business. I earn my living by speaking at conferences. My gosh, I mean, there's going to be fewer events, and the events are going to be smaller. And I think we will get back to normal eventually, but I think it'll take years, like 2-3 years, for people to feel comfortable. So
while you were answering that one, Patrick, a few more came in. Okay. Yeah. What do you foresee for the quick service restaurant industry? And that came from Alejandro.
Yeah, I mean, the pickup and delivery market is booming. There's Blue Apron. There's this company called Chewy that sells pet food, like these big 50-pound bags of pet food, and their stock is surging. So there's, for the quick kind of like what do they call it? It's like casual. I don't know what it's like Chipotle, for example. Like those sorts of places are going to continue for sure, but it's just going to be done in a different way. I think more people will pick up and eat somewhere else. Maybe there's going to be more like communal tables outside where people, not communal, but like areas to sit down so that people don't have to sit within a particular restaurant. I think the problem is that, one, and I forget what company, but there's a study I just read the other day that said that 50% of US businesses they could not survive a full month. They couldn't survive 27 days is the number. They couldn't survive 27 days without new revenue. I don't know where they got the 27 days from, but just call it a month. So potentially 50% of businesses don't have 1 month of cash flow on hand. That means that like the big chains will probably survive. Although even there, like the Cheesecake Factory looks like they're probably gonna go bankrupt. So there's all sorts of pain coming even on the larger side. But the small players, like a lot of them are just they're never gonna reopen because they're out of cash. They're literally out of cash. And the Fed is printing this money and sending it out, and it's affecting the stock market. I mean, here's the stock market's a sobering thing because the illness is affecting, in terms of unemployment, it's affecting the poor people more than the rich people. And in terms of the businesses, the large market cap companies are not affected nearly as much as the small ones. And the investing public, they don't care. And the market keeps rallying. I mean, it's just insane. We've, retraced 61.8% of the original move as of today, 61.8%. Now I think probably it'll stall out here. And again, some of the larger risks, which will play out, starting a few months from now, will come in. But a lot of these small players and small restaurants, it's going to be really hard. And I feel for them because they're bent over right now. They're out of cash.
Got another one for you.
Okay.
And there's several more below that. So if you could,
guys, I know there's people are dropping off. It's totally fine. Don't worry. I mean, I like this stuff. So let's do a couple more and then,
Well, actually, we also have some people who have been joining us because in some markets we had time confusion. And so people might have joined thinking that it had started an hour after it did. So we kind of have a blend of an audience. So I'd like to deliver value for those who are also unable to hear your formal talk, although that's recorded and the slides will be sent out. What do you see for radio stations?
Oh, wow. That's a great question.
It's a good group here. They ask good questions.
Yeah, no kidding. That's a great question. I mean, look, I don't see any reason for them to suffer necessarily. The question is, like, will the advertisers come back? And that's, that's what's happening right now. Is a lot of, I know a guy who has a huge website. He makes a ridiculous amount of money selling advertising, but his advertisers have mostly disappeared. So, and the radios need the advertising dollars. So I don't know. It's a good question. I think it's going to be tricky with the ad revenue, and they're also competing more and more, the podcasters. I mean, that's effectively online radio. I do think, the radio television alternatives are going to struggle because more and more of their pie is going to get taken by, other channels like podcasts and videos, YouTube videos and such. But I think, if they have a good content, I don't think there's going to be a huge problem there. I don't know. And if someone else does, they should put that in the chat because I feel like I'm not answering this one well.
And that came from Lucero Rodriguez, and Javier Fernandez would like to know, how can an organic superfood and healthy foods company create a disruption or a disruptive way of marketing their strategy? So
right now, I mean, this is just the first thing that comes to mind. I'm sure there's 1,000 options, but an underutilized advertising platform today is Amazon. I mean, it is unbelievable what you can do on Amazon with the right targeting. Like the targeting options are absolutely incredible. So, and I see that because in the supplement industry, like there's literally new players coming up all on their own. Here's what happens, right? So I'm like a supplement junkie. I take a ton of supplements, and I'm not evangelizing that. Like that's just, whatever. That's the way I live my life. But so I look at these different supplements on Amazon, and I always find at the very top it says there's a sponsored listing, and there's some provider for the thing I'm looking for, and they've got like 6,000 reviews, and I'm like, yeah, I don't trust it, right? They paid for their spot. It's a sponsored spot, so I'm going to scroll down and go to the bestseller. And it's the same company. It's the same product. It's the same product. So what did they do? They advertised like heck and got the exposure. And sure enough, they became the bestseller. They bought their way in. I mean, it's astonishing to me. So now, like, the quality of the product is hard to truly evaluate because the advertising is that effective. And you know, I noticed this even in book marketing. Like book marketing has been dramatically affected. So you know, there's marketing. It's all about, you know, they talk about, like, of course, targeting, segmentation, and what they call exclusions. So you run an ad, and the basic ad might not even, you might not even be looking for sales. Okay, it depends on what you're trying to do. But you have a basic ad. You point them to a page. Like I see this all the time on Instagram, where you see these incredible photographs of beautiful clothes, and they obviously know that I like clothes because I see all the pictures. But the photos are so compelling that you go to the page. And then on the page, you either do one thing or you don't. Like you either engage with the content or you click off. Well, they track that. And so now you don't have one target market, you have two, because you know the people who came to the page and did something and the people who didn't. And so now you send a different message. You know, you can put like a Facebook pixel on the landing page. And so now on Facebook, you can target the people who did engage. You can give them a custom message tailored to, you know, hey, thanks so much for engaging with this. Here's something else for you. And then the people who didn't, you can, again, have a custom message saying, hey, we saw that you visited the page. You know, here's some more information and it's free, or whatever, like some more enticements, what they call a tripwire, where you give them something very cheap and inexpensive, but you're delivering some value, and so you're building trust. But the bottom line is this segmentation. Like I know a good friend of mine does that really at a sophisticated level, where you got one campaign at the top, and then it splits into two, and then those both split into two, and it all splits, and you end up with like 16 or 18 different subgroups after they've gone through your marketing funnel. So, and that's all data, the data and analytics. I mean, that you can go to Google Ads. Like, for example, if any of you go to my website, you don't have to, but if you did, you're going to see my ads in other places for the next 30 days, because that's something that you can do. And that's an exclusion in a sense as well. Like I'm targeting you because you went to my website. And there's even other websites like my competitors. I've got a campaign that targets 7 of my competitors' websites. And if you go to any one of their websites, you start seeing my ads. Like, I'm surprised that's legal. Like, I think that should be illegal. I can't believe that you're allowed to do that, but you're allowed to do it. And so the targeting, the online targeting is so incredible. And you always have to think about what's the lifetime value of the customer, because the first sale you're almost guaranteed to lose money on, right? And that's okay. That's by design. Don't worry about it. The marketing, you want to get that customer, but once you get them, you want to keep them. And you can do some very, very sophisticated advertising. You can do it on Amazon. You can do it on Instagram. You know, the micro influencers, the influencers going that route. Like I don't have a big following at all, a very small following, but I get these invitations by companies to promote because I'm supposedly a micro influencer. So the whole marketing thing is changing, but there's still a big pay to play option where you can do paid ads in a sophisticated, targeted way, and you can convert, you can make money.
Well, while you were answering that question, a couple more came in. Can we stay with you a little bit longer?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. How do you see the legal services industry law firms came from Carlos?
So it's like the bank tellers. So in the 1980s, the ATMs, the automatic teller machines or whatever, bank machines were introduced, and everyone thought the bank tellers were all going to lose their jobs. And it turns out they didn't. In fact, there's more bank tellers today than there were back then. And the reason is really important actually, because the ATMs did the simple deposits and withdrawals automatically, it meant that you needed fewer tellers per branch. But that meant that your break-even point for branches was dropped and you could open more branches. And that's exactly what happened. So there was a time when you only had a bank branch in downtown city streets. Now you find bank branches in virtually every neighborhood because the break-even point has dropped. So there's more branches overall, and then a smaller number of tellers in each particular branch. And they're doing more sophisticated stuff. Like they're talking about mortgage products or retirement products or whatever. They're doing more sophisticated work. The tellers that are in the system today than what they were doing in the 80s. So with lawyers, the discovery process, I mean, automation is playing a huge role in the legal field right now. Paralegals and discovery folks are using tools that are just unbelievable. And we've already seen a significant decline in employees per billion in revenue in the legal field because they're leveraging these technologies, and it's very, very effective. And the result is that the lawyers are doing more and more sophisticated stuff. Now, the downside is that here, at least here in America, I mean, I grew up in Canada, and the legal, kind of suing mentality, like the litigation mentality of America it's sad, and I think it's really destructive. That's my personal opinion. So of course, the lawyers that are out there are marketing and looking for clients and telling them that they can do, even more sophisticated lawsuits and litigation, using litigation strategies to improve their clients. So, I mean, what do you do with that? Lawyers aren't going away, but they're going to be more and more specialized and doing more and more sophisticated work and leveraging technology on a large scale for the discovery process.
Sergio would like to know, do you think people will keep buying apparel as they did before COVID?
Yeah, that's another good one. So it's, you buy clothes to look good when you go out. If you're not going out, you don't need to look good. And people will be going out less. I mean, again, some people can't wait. They want to go out, like the day this is over, they're going to be all over the place. But it's not 100%. It's not 0%, it's not 100. It's in between those two. So there's some percentage of the people that are not going to feel comfortable going out in the near term, and so their incentive to buy fancy, fashionable clothing will go down. Again, I am not saying it's going to zero. I'm not saying it's over. I'm not saying any of those things, but I think there will be downward pressure on fashion revenue in the near term. And could it recover eventually? Sure, absolutely. But in the near term, I think you got downward pressure on revenue.
Eduardo would like to know, from your perspective, how will the workplace change in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I just read an article yesterday about a plexiglass provider that just cannot produce plexiglass fast enough because all of the companies are putting up plexiglass dividers in between the cubicles. We're going to see a lot more virtual work. I mean, at the end of the day, that's, the easiest one to say is that more people are going to be working from home. And it's effective and it's productive. Not for 100% of the people. Again, it's never 100%. But for, like, I've been working at home since 1998. So this has been more than half of my career has been working at home, and I love it. And a lot of people will be doing that more and more. So the workplaces will change. But, so for example, the millennial, the younger generations and Gen Z, like, they want the flat organization. So the new Facebook headquarters in Mountain View is literally a huge, wide open, looks like a warehouse cavern. And inside there's hundreds and hundreds of desks, all, not lined up, they're all diagonal, and it kind of creates this whole collage of different office spaces. But, I've been inside that building, and it's loud, and there's stuff going on all the time. And some people love it, but a lot of people are not as productive there as they are at home. So I think we're going to just see a lot more people working virtually. And the offices that are there, we're going to see these plexiglass dividers. Like, even at retail stores, you go to the grocery store, the one I go to here in Newport Beach, sure enough, plexiglass between me and the cashier. So, that won't last forever. I mean, I think that will subside, but for the near term, we'll probably see that all over the place.
Dave Taylor asked, what's the biggest change you think we'll see post-COVID-19 because of the pandemic?
Wow. I mean, so the trend that I see more than any other is decentralization. And it overlaps a lot of the others. Like, if you're working at home, that's virtualization. Well, that's a decentralized work environment. And even like self-sufficiency, people want to be off the grid. That's decentralized. So we see this kind of all over the place. And I think, Donald Trump, you might love him, you might hate him. I don't care, right? It's not about that. But he gave a speech at the United Nations a few months ago and said something like, the future doesn't belong to globalists. The future belongs to patriots. And he didn't know it at the time, but with this COVID-19, I think we're going to see a trend in that direction. Like, nationalistic, populist policies, nationalistic, policies, protecting your backyard. Like, let's just take automation, for example, right? Like automation, the more automated a production process is, the less relative advantage you get by going to a low labor cost environment. So you manufacture in Vietnam because the labor rates are really low, but if labor only accounts for 5% of your production's retail value, it doesn't make a difference. And meanwhile, you have to ship it across the world. So you got an incentive to bring that, back. So the more automated a plant is, the more likely you're going to bring some production back to your own backyard because the labor rates just don't make that much of a difference anymore. So does that contradict my decentralization? Maybe it does in a way. I mean, these things all overlap, and I don't pretend to have like a crystal clear opinion of how all these things are going to play out, but I do think that people are going to become more tribal and more fractured. Like people, they agree with some Democratic policies and some Republican policies, and they consider themselves an independent. Like people don't subscribe to these broad notions anymore. They're very specific, and there's so many, gurus and influencers and people out there that we can follow, podcasters and God knows who. Everyone's going to have their own unique set of people they follow and people they agree with, and it's just going to be like micro segmentation where every individual, is running on their own, on their own logic system. And that to me is another form of decentralization. I don't know if that answers your question, and I apologize if it's kind of off target, but.
Well, Luis Trujillo would like to know, what do you think about the challenge for the tourism industry? How to survive in these times of pandemic, and will they ever get back, or will the change be forever in the tourism industry?
I mean, and this is, I actually, just so you know, I actually do need to probably run after this one because I've got to get, I have to go to the grocery store before they come over for dinner. But anyway, tourism, I mean, it's very sad because it's brutal. I mean, it's going to take a long time for the tourism to come back. Again, some people will race back to their previous patterns, but it's not going to be anywhere close to 100%. People are not going to feel comfortable. It's going to take a long time for this to play out. So the tourism industry, I think, is really in for a rough go. And I don't know how to fix that. I mean, I just think you look at it in the stock market, my gosh, I mean, the tourism companies, the airlines, hotels, they just got decimated, just completely decimated. And that reflects, the reality. The stock market is a remarkably good tool. Here, let me tell you here's a great one to finish on, actually. You want to get a good idea of who's benefiting the most as a result of all this chaos. You can go to the stock market, you can use what's called a stock screener, and just search for the stocks that are trading at or near their 52-week high. So they're at all-time highs, right? Or at least, 52-week highs. And you'll immediately see like all the names that Zoom is going to be there, and Slack and Amazon and Costco and Zynga and I mean, you're just going to see all these, there's some pharma companies in the mix. Blue Apron's probably going to be there. Chewy's going to be there. Like you can see very quickly who's going to do well. In the stock market, you're basically getting the consensus of millions of smart investors all around the world who are placing bets on these individual stocks, and all their bets, bull and bear, end up playing out in the price volume action. So you can literally look at the chart and be like, yeah, this company is clearly doing well. And you can do the same thing in reverse. You can look for companies trading at or near their 52-week lows. And who are you going to see there? I mean, right now you're going to see a bunch of oil markets there because the oil market is totally collapsed, and airlines and hotels and a lot of companies are down there at the bottom of the pack because they're going to suffer. So, it is a good way to get a consensus opinion on what the future is going to hold because, you're literally seeing 100% of the participants in each individual stock. So.
Patrick, I just want to thank you, but before I do that, for people who maybe weren't here when you put up the offer to send the PDF of your book, could you share your screen again?
Yeah, for sure.
And give them so they have your email, and maybe make that offer one last time for people who maybe didn't hear that part of the talk?
Yeah. So this is my last slide. So listen, there's zero pressure. There's no sales pitch here at all. But this book, this is a mock-up of the cover. Just hopefully by Friday or Saturday, I'll have the manuscript finished, and then it has to go to the editors. So it has not been edited, which means there's mistakes, right? If you're going to send it to you, you're going to see mistakes. You're like, hey, there's a mistake here. I know there's lots, but anyway, I would love to get it to you. I'd be happy to send it to you for free as a PDF. And my little bonus or whatever is that if you read it quickly, and again, you don't have to, but if you do, and if you have a testimonial comment about the book, email me a second time. The email's on the screen right now. Email me a second time and I'll include your quote in the book, or at least I'll try to. I have no idea how many I would get from something like this, but I'd love to include half a dozen or a dozen quotes at the beginning of the book of people who have read it. And this is, for me, this is a great opportunity because you're all business leaders, you're all, owners or executives in companies. And meanwhile, not just here in America, like I'd love to have people from South America, other parts of the world. So if you'd like to read the book, I'd be thrilled to get it to you. I'll probably get it to you Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. But send me an email and we'll go from there.
It's been my pleasure to introduce Patrick Schwerdtfeger to our Global Renaissance Executive Forums community. This has been a wonderful conversation. I do apologize if people had timing issues with it. We are certainly going to make all the insight available to you, the information, the slides, etc. I encourage you to send Patrick an email and get a copy of his book. Each book that I've read from Patrick has been amazing and very impactful. I'd like to thank Carrie Ann for all the work that she's done behind the scenes to make this work so well. Could not have done it without her support and leadership in this, as well as the global organization and the North American leadership. So on behalf of Renaissance Executive Forums, I want to thank all of you for participating. Those of you that submitted your questions, thank you for bringing that energy to the meeting. Those of you that submitted questions that we weren't able to get to, we'll see if we can maybe get Patrick in his good graces to provide you with a personal response if he's willing to do that as well. And I'd like to thank everyone again and wish you all well. Stay healthy, enjoy your families, and I look forward to the next in these series of insightful talks. Thank you.
Thank you.